On this week's episode of Hockey Inside Out, what will the message be from Habs management in the post-mortem on Friday's press conference? And for Chris Weidman, he has some choice words about the Toronto Maple Leafs and what could happen to them in a few weeks. What could that be? And what was the worst part of the Montreal Canadiens season as they go towards their off year? Plus the bonus questions on this week's episode of Hockey Inside Out. Welcome into another episode of Hockey Inside Out. I'm your host, Mo Khan, alongside Stu Cowan, Andrew Berkshire, and the well-rested and well-tanned Rick Green. Gentlemen, welcome back. Let's dive into it. The Habs are out. They'll have the post-mortem on Friday. What will be the message from Habs management going to the offseason this summer?
I think it's mainly going to be positive. I mean, this is a team with 2 games left in the regular season. There's already a 13-point improvement from last season, despite all the injuries, like half the team watching from the press box. So, when they went into the season, it was all about developing the young players. And they've maybe, as negative as the injuries have been for the record-wise, it's helped them as far as development. 5 rookie defensemen getting an opportunity to play. Raphael Harvey-Pinard coming up and becoming a scoring sensation. He probably never would have even played for the Canadiens this year if it wasn't for all the injuries. Got an opportunity, made the most of it. It'd be surprising if he's not with the team next season when they open training camp. The injuries were the big story of the year. Cole Caulfield still leads the team in goals, but 2 games left in the season, even though he's missed almost 30 games. So it just shows you that, Nick Suzuki with career highs in goals and points, tying his career high already for assists without having Cole Caulfield on his wing for so long, and with a cast of revolving door of line mates, including a lot of guys called up from the AHL to play beside him. So it's been mainly, despite the fact, it looks like they're going to finish 28th, possibly 27th. From where they were last season, from what this team looked like when Jeff Gorton was hired and then Kent Hughes and then Marty St. Louis to start this rebuild and take over what was just the worst team in the NHL, a team that had no spark to it, a team that players looked like they didn't want to play here anymore. That's changed. The environment in the locker room has changed. They have a good culture they're building in there. There are a bunch of guys who like each other, a bunch of young guys who are going to grow up together. So I think it's mainly going to be positive, and the negative side to the season was obviously the injuries.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Stu. They're going to highlight the positive of, the opportunity of some of these young kids getting a chance to show what they can show. And, like every year, my experience has been there's going to be a review of each and every guy in the organization. And, we touched on before the number of injuries and how it's affected the hockey club. They're going to be reviewing all of those people that are involved in both the treatment and the procedures to have a look at, this type of thing, hopefully not happening again. Some of it's been bad luck, but some of the stuff, I think they have to be held accountable. And they're going to review those positions just as much as the coaching staff. Look at everybody is responsible for certain things within the organization, and the coaches are responsible for, if you want to look at special teams, individuals are responsible for, directing and basically working with those special teams. That has really struggled. I think they're going to really have a hard look to see what went on with that and how they can improve in that area. But, overall, I think that they're going the right way. The fan base seems to feel confident that the direction is going well. But let's face it, next year expectations are going to be higher. You've got some guys that are supposed to be better going into their second year with added experience. So let's say that everybody involved in watching the Montreal Canadiens next year is going to be watching closely to get a good start and carry on with what they did earlier on in the season before the injuries hit them. So the good and the bad, lots of positives, but they do have to review and address some of the areas that brought them down to the point where they had a losing season.
Yeah, I agree that the outlook is probably going to be mostly positive at the end of the season press conference, and I think that most of the questions will be either about injuries or about the general trend of the club, which is continually positive. But I think, like Rick said, there's going to be more scrutiny around this team next season. And if they have the same injury troubles next season as they had the previous two, all of a sudden things don't look so positive, because you got to be able to have guys playing in order to develop them, right? You can't just have guys sitting out half of every season. It's been ridiculous the last 2 years now. And I think that there should be some expectation of improvement next year. Like this year, they can only get up to 72 points or something like that. Obviously, it benefits the organization if they lose out, keep that fifth spot, better chance at Bedard, all that. But next season, I would assume that the goal is not to be bottom three. And if Samuel Montembeault can't repeat what he did this year, we may see very little progression at all if they don't get a Connor Bedard in the lineup. I think the overall message is positive, but also we should be looking for the Canadiens to talk about patience, because development's not linear for young players, right? There's some defensemen in that those 5 rookies that are going to take a step back next year. Some will take a step forward, but there will be times where there's still struggles. So there's a lot of young players in this team, a lot of variation in what can happen. So I think that as much as people are expecting a big step forward next year, not a playoff team, but maybe like 80, 85 points, ask the Ottawa Senators. Sometimes you make plans and it just doesn't work out.
Ask the Buffalo Sabres, too.
No kidding.
I'm missing the playoffs again this year. Patience is going to be a key word, though, Andrew. You're right. I mean, Kent Hughes did a podcast recently with Pierre LeBrun and was asked, how far away do you think you are from being that team? As they've said right from the beginning, they want a team that's going to be competitive every year and in the playoffs and a contender every year, not just for 1 or 2 years. And he said we're probably 3 years away. And it's a bold for him to make that statement in Montreal market, but it's true. Rebuilds take time. It's going to take some time for these guys to develop. You're right, Andrew. Some of the guys that had good rookie seasons will fall back next season. The sophomore jinx. We all heard about that in sports. And the other question that's going to come up Friday is, when are they going to sign Cole Caulfield? This is dragging on. Maybe that's the day they announce it, because I know a lot of guys are leaving and going out of town. I know Kent Hughes is leaving town on Saturday. If you want to clear that up and get that taken care of so we don't keep talking about it moving forward, the longer it drags on, remember what happened with Jesperi Kotkaniemi with the offer sheet. So I think that's another question that Kent Hughes will obviously be asked. And you're right with Montembeault. Montembeault was one of the real pleasant surprises, a goalie with a save percentage above 900 on a team that is not very good defensively. He's played really well. I know you know the analytics stats there, Andrew, about his the saves on the high percentage chances that he's made. He's been really good. He's a good guy in the league. He's so calm too. Like nothing seems to faze him. And on a team that's rebuilding, I think that's really important. Jake Allen's the same way. And Montembeault at this point has taken over as number one goalie for this team. It'll be interesting to see in the offseason. Caden Primo got called up for those couple of games. If the Rocket get in the playoff run and he has another strong playoff run, do they move Jake Allen in the offseason and decide this is the time that Caden Primo, we got to see what he can do in the NHL with playing 35 games or whatever? So there's a lot of things to look forward to in the offseason. There's going to be a lot of questions on Friday afternoon for both Jeff Gorton and Kent Hughes.
John, I want to ask you this question. How early, Stu, will the question come up about the medical department of this Canadiens organization? As we've seen the last couple of years, they've sustained a lot of injuries with their players. So is that going to be a forefront question on Friday's post-mortem?
I'm sure it will be. And as Rick said, a lot of it's bad luck. Like Josh Anderson crashing into the goalpost feet first and having a high ankle sprain. No training is going to fix that. Or somebody falling on Jake Evans's knee, or injuries like that, they're going to happen. The concern is the guys coming back too soon from those injuries and getting injured again, or guys not being told to come off the ice. Caden Goulet, I remember he injured his shoulder after coming back from a knee injury, was allowed to keep playing with that. Then he had the high ankle sprain. He came back and played after that. I remember Brendan Gallagher being hurt badly, or looked like he was hurt badly in a practice in Nashville. He finished the practice. He played the next game. Then he was out for 32 games. It seems to be a recurring thing where, Mike Matheson coming back from a groin injury, re-aggravating it and being out again. So injuries are going to happen in hockey. You're going to have broken bones and sprains and whatnot. But my concern is that guys coming back too early from injuries and then being out again instead of taking the necessary time to fully heal.
And I think the reality is, if you look at the numbers of guys that have been down and out, it's hey, there's no secret here. There's guys that had bad luck in the injury that they got, but they're still overall picture here is a lot of guys that really got hurt and extended periods of time, which is somebody has to be held responsible for the direction that they've been given. And I've seen, and it's happened when I was involved, that those guys are called out, and sometimes, I'm not saying changes are made, but they have to have serious consultation on everybody involved on decisions that have been made in the past. So this doesn't happen again, because you're not going anywhere, as we've seen with guys that are up and down in and out of the lineup for extended periods of time. So I think it's going to be a big part of their discussions moving forward.
And injuries help the team in some ways, in that, as I was saying earlier, give a lot of guys a chance to play who would have otherwise not played, like Harvey Pinard and the rookie defenseman. But it hurt in other ways too. And Sean Monahan's a classic example of that. They were hoping they would be able to trade him for another first-round draft pick, and the way he had been playing, they probably could have. But, season-ending groin surgery, was that in relation to him trying to play on the broken foot and compensating and injuring his groin? That probably factored into it a little bit. So why he wasn't shut down when he had the broken foot and was allowed to continue playing is one of the questions. And the Canadiens paid a heavy price for it, because now Sean Monahan, I don't know if anybody's going to sign him for next season. Sadly, his career might be over. He's had groin surgery before. He's had surgery on both hips. He's had all kinds of surgeries. He's beaten up. And the Canadiens had an opportunity to maybe turn him into another first-round pick or a second-round pick or something, and instead they're going to get nothing.
Well, if only he had a few years left on his contract, Arizona would be all over him.
He would be part of the alumni game with him and Shea Weber and others. Wayne Gretzky coaching that team as well. Speaking of teams,
they could play in that 5,000-seat arena too.
Speaking of teams, the Montreal Canadiens got righted by the Maple Leafs over the weekend. It wasn't pretty at all, and Chris Weidman had some choice words for the Leafs that they will get what they will deserve in a few weeks in regards to Jet Alexander, the U Sports goalie from the University of Toronto, getting some mop-up time in the final minute of that hockey game on Saturday night. So, gents, your thoughts on this from the perspective of Weidman? Was he right on what the Leafs did? How do we look at this from this perspective, though?
Well, I think it's obvious he was angry and embarrassed by what played out. I don't care any athlete that gets something like that happen to them, you're not too happy. And, the comment that he made, I don't know why he would make that comment, really. As angry as you might be, Toronto Maple Leafs and top 4 in the league, it's not like it's a fluke or that they're not going to. I mean, we all know Toronto's record in the playoff, but I think to make a comment like that, I don't see really a place for it. And coming from Chris Weidman, I don't think that the Toronto Maple Leafs took too much to heart with that, other than maybe, inside feeling that it's going to motivate them to prove that maybe that comment, or others that comment about their ability to choke in playoffs, put that behind them. But anyways, I don't see a place for a comment like that at this stage. Montreal is out. Toronto has had a really good year, and that's just like petty little comments that really do nothing other than show the anger of an individual.
Yeah, I don't hold that comment against Chris Weidman. On the one hand, I appreciate his feistiness. We've seen now for 2 seasons, around the end of the season, when a lot of players aren't engaged, Weidman, with all his limitations, is very engaged. And yes, he's playing to prolong his NHL career, but he's stuck up for guys in fights that he should not have taken on. So I do appreciate that, but I totally agree with Rick that this is a frustrated player who was completely embarrassed by the way that the Canadiens played in that game, which was horrendous. And he just latched on to whatever he could latch on to push that embarrassment and that frustration, that anger onto someone else, and that was the Toronto Maple Leafs. I don't think the Maple Leafs did anything wrong at all in playing Jet Alexander. I think that's a cool moment. The Edmonton Oilers did it earlier this year with their emergency backup goaltender, and nobody said anything really as far as I heard. So this is not something that should matter. In terms of if he's going to be angry at least about anything, honestly, it should be about the whining. my God, the whining from that coaching staff. Like, if I'm a Maple Leafs fan and I see Sheldon Keefe losing his mind on the refs for like a full minute when it's 5-1 against a lottery team, I wonder about his mental preparation going into the playoffs. So if I was Chris Weidman, that's what I would have keyed on. I would have chirped that. But I'm a little bit disappointed that it's Weidman's comments that have kind of gone like wildfire throughout the internet, because Mike Matheson had a fantastic comment post game, and I thought his talk about like sportsmanship and wanting to not be embarrassed and like they should be disappointed in themselves and not wanting to give the opportunity for the Leafs to put in that backup goaltender. That is the kind of leadership that I want to see highlighted. Chris Weidman, unfortunately, I think it's a tough moment for him and a tough season for him.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there, Andrew. Chris Weidman is a fiery competitor. You mentioned last season when they didn't have anybody really protect Suzuki. He was the one jumping in and dropping his gloves. He's not a big guy. He's listed at maybe 175. He's not even that. He's less than whatever he's listed at. But he's a fiery competitor. That's how he got to the NHL as a defenseman at the size he is. I wasn't in Toronto in the locker room when the interview was being done, but it was in the heat of the moment, I'm sure. He was still pissed off after the game. And he said what he felt. And, we often talk in the media about, hockey players never say anything interesting. They speak in cliches. Well, here's a guy who didn't speak in cliches. He said exactly what was on his mind. He was pissed off. And he said the Leafs will get what they deserve in 2 weeks, and they might. This is a team that hasn't won a first-round playoff series since 2004. I wouldn't be shocked if Tampa Bay takes them out again this year. But I think it wasn't just that. I don't have a problem with what they did with the goalie either. I mean, imagine it was a game in Montreal, and the Canadiens had a McGill or Concordia backup guy that were called up for that day. We'd be thinking it was pretty cool, right, that they put him in to get his name in the NHL record book as he played a game. But there was other things also, as you mentioned, Andrew, the coach getting so upset at the referees and losing his cool behind the bench, sending Wayne Simmons out to fight Michael Pizzetta. Wayne Simmons has played like 17 games this year. I don't think he has a goal. He's basically just there to fight. It was one of those staged, stupid fights. The first power play unit getting on the ice at the end of the game when they're up 6-1 or 7-1. So I think it was a number of things that had upset Chris Weidman and probably some other guys in the Canadiens who weren't interviewed after the game. But I don't really have a problem with it. I think it's sports, and he said what was on his mind, and we're talking about it now. Weidman would probably now, not in the heat of the moment, wish maybe he didn't say it. But it was, he was upset. He was pissed off, and he said exactly how he felt. And it did upset him, and I'm sure it upset some other guys on the Canadiens too. And we'll see. Maybe the Leafs will get what Chris Weidman thinks they deserve in a couple of weeks.
Odds are, right? And I think that kind of, anger after a game has a place, right? Like we always talk about, we want more personality from these players. We want more heat in the rivalries, not where it escalates to the point of the Bloody Sunday game between the Habs and the Nordiques. We don't really want to see that again, but a little bit more fire in this rivalry isn't a bad thing. I don't think the 2021 series was boring by any means, but I don't think those teams hated each other until it was over and the Leafs realized what they did in screwing that up. And it seems like since then, the Leafs definitely have more of a chip on their shoulder when it comes to the Montreal Canadiens organizationally, not just the players. But I think there's, we talked about Michel Therrien's comments about Michael Pizzetta recently about how not disrespecting your opponents. I think there needs to be a little bit more, not necessarily disrespect, but some more hate in the game, right? Get these guys a little bit more fiery about each other. And as much as I don't necessarily agree with what Chris Weidman said, I appreciate the fire.
Yeah, I wish more guys would be as outspoken as he is, as someone who covers the team. And not just speaking cliches, but there's a reason why the media isn't let in the locker room for about 10 minutes after the games, and one of the reasons is to let the guys sort of cool down a bit, right? When you come in after a game, the tempers are either the emotions high from being happy or the emotions are high from being upset. And this was a case of a guy being upset and letting his emotions maybe get the best of him. But again, that's how he felt, and he spoke his mind. So I don't have a problem with that.
Rick, can you relate to Weidman? You've been in a lot of rivalry games yourself in your pro career, and can you kind of sympathize with his frustration, how this played out for the Habs, given what happened on Saturday night?
Without question. Like I said, nobody wants to get embarrassed, and he has some pride as a professional, and totally embarrassed on what happened. So he responded in that way. It would have been maybe, if you want to call it more appropriate, if this type of comment happened before the 80-game mark of the season, might have brought a little more intensity to finish up the half of the season versus 2 games. So, anyways, like I said, angry, disappointed that played out that way. Bringing in a goalie, no big deal in my book. But Weidman is a quality guy, 32 years old, been around a little while, and he just spoke from the heart. And you know what? It's not the first time, won't be the last time.
Well, Rick, I know the coaches have a cool down period before they face the media. Also, I'm sure when you were an assistant coach, you saw some guys, coaches maybe taking a few deep breaths before they went out to face the media.
Well, I'll tell you, as an assistant, thank goodness there was many times that I kind of lost it a little bit, and it was just as well that I probably couldn't have handled somebody asking a question that I would have gone off and probably been sorry the next day. So it's all part of the game. It's the heat of the moment, and that's a big part of the game, and it's a great part of the game. But sometimes you have to be careful in your choice of words.
Well, I remember Claude Julien getting very upset at me in a post-game news conference a few years ago, and I asked him a question about Carey Price. They'd played Carey Price like 13 games in a row or something, and I was like, yeah. And he got really upset at me in the press conference. And then a couple of days later, he saw me. We were on the road, I think in Florida. He pulled me aside and apologized and said, I wasn't upset at you. I was pissed off at my team. So it's the heat of the moment of guys get upset. And Claude Julien is a great guy, a character guy. And I didn't take it personally when he got upset at me, but it's just one of those things. The heat of the moment, guys are upset. And our job is to ask questions. And sometimes we ask questions guys don't like, or they get upset. Or, as I said with Chris Weidman, it wasn't the question that upset him. He was just pissed off at the Leafs. That was it.
And then, from the coaching side, you've got to face the music on which guys you had on the ice at certain times. And sometimes it plays out. Sometimes it doesn't play out, as we've seen in Calgary. But, you got to go with your gut. And there is some pressure there on decisions that are made on who gets on the ice. And then if it ends up blowing up in your face, you got to be careful when somebody throws it in your face as why would you put that guy on the ice? So it's a great game.
Well, I'm sure Chris Weidman's teammates, I'm sure a few of the Canadiens guys got a good chuckle out of Weidman's comment, and we're riding him a little bit about it afterwards also.
Well, I'll say this. As a U Sports guy, because I call a lot of play-by-play for U Sports, what Chris Weidman did is indirectly give exposure to the U Sports level of hockey. And Stu, Andrew, Rick, it's a hidden gem in Canada of the hockey players who play at the university level. For Jet Alexander, I'm not saying he's going to get a contract from this, but what could happen for him is that maybe there'll be a pro team in a lower level in Europe that might look at him and say, well, hold on here. He played 45 seconds for the Leafs here, but what's he all about? And he might get himself some exposure from that. So in a way, Chris Weidman brought some indirect exposure in a great way for the U Sports level of hockey moving forward.
Yeah, I often say University hockey in Montreal is one of the best kept secrets there is. It's fantastic hockey. It's guys who are 23, 24 years old, completed their junior hockey careers, now playing university. It's fantastic hockey to go watch.
Definitely is. We'll find out. We'll find out if Weidman is right in his prophecy in a few weeks that the Leafs could be golfing or could be going to round 2 of the NHL playoffs. We'll find out as we move towards the playoffs next week. Well, on to the final question for this week, guys. With the season wrapping up this week, the most disappointing part of the Habs season was what?
I think it's the injuries, but more specifically, it's the injuries to the young players, right? I think taking Yuri Slafkovsky out halfway through the season was just really poor luck, losing Cole Caulfield, Caden Gooley's season being so interrupted. It's that series of injuries against young players who are developing that we all wanted to see the progress throughout the year. We wanted to see Slafkovsky get some reps so he can get more used to North American ice, all that stuff that essentially has put off development for those players until next year. I think that's by far the biggest disappointment this season, because overall, I think the progress that the roster has made makes sense. I guess you could say injuries to Sean Monahan for the trades, but I feel like it's the young players that loom larger than the loss of being able to trade like Edmondson and Sean Monahan.
Yeah, well, with all the hype over the Habs finally getting the number 1 overall pick, first time since Doug Wickenheiser, I think Slafkovsky's rookie season was disappointing. I think that's 4 goals in 39 games before getting hurt. He looked like he wasn't ready to play in the NHL. I think some time in Laval would have done him well. I think one of the World Junior Championships would have done him well either. The Canadiens decided to keep him here. We'll see moving forward whether that backfires on them or not, or whether he can pick it up next season. He missed a lot of development time, obviously, from being injured, only playing in the 39 games. The injury is also disappointing, Andrew, but I think one of the injuries that was disappointing was a veteran with Brendan Gallagher. Going into the season, Gallagher was finally healthy. I was looking forward to seeing him. I thought he would. I think I thought he could score 20 goals this season, coming back and being healthy. I don't know if he'll ever be a 30-goal scorer again, but I thought he could be a 20-goal scorer. Then he misses 45 games. His 8 goals in 35 games that he's played, which would put him on pace for 19 over an 82-game season. He has 4 goals in the first 10 games since coming back fully healthy. So it was a disappointing season for him. And Brendan Gallagher's a proud guy. He's a competitor. He's a warrior. I've written this. I've said this before. Is he overpaid now? Yes. But he's earned every single dollar the Canadiens have ever given. The work ethic is always off the chart. He was underpaid when he was scoring 30 goals. He's going to be overpaid going forward the rest of his career. But nobody's more frustrated or upset in his performance than Brendan Gallagher. He puts a lot of pressure on himself, and it was disappointing that he had the injuries that he had. We saw him wearing the walking boot cast that I think got passed around to half the team this year. But he said at the end of the season he'll tell us exactly what the injury was. Brendan Gallagher could have an arrow sticking out of his head and would say there was nothing wrong with him. Just that type of a competitor. So it'll be interesting to see at the end of the season exactly what he played through. He let it slip at one point. It was a broken bone, whether it was in his foot or in his leg. So we'll find out exactly what it was. But disappointing season for him, especially coming into it and what he had hoped to do. And the injury, as you mentioned earlier, to Sean Monahan was obviously very disappointing also.
For me, to this date, disappointing is 298 goals against. I've touched on it before, and this surfaces way too often in my mind that this is a team that really has problems in defending, and you can blame it on maybe the personnel and lack of personnel of having everybody doing their thing and healthy, but too many times defensemen trusting the forward to play defense, it's not going to work. And their overall defensive game, playing high risk type in the zone, unless they can do something to repair and protect more of the critical areas in the defensive zone, they're not going to win their share of games. So that part of the game has gone on for most of the year, and that's an area that I have a real big disappointment with seeing it continually happen each and every night, to give up that many goals against. And the way that the goals were happening, it's tough to watch sometimes. So I believe they have to do some reviewing of strategy and job assignment to repair that, or otherwise they're going to struggle come next year.
Yeah, never trust the forward, right, Rick?
It'll never change, and you can look at the reviews and the replays. As soon as you do, you know what happens.
Well, Marty St. Louis had a really interesting quote about midway through this season. He has these concepts, or this brand of hockey, as he describes it, he wants them to play. And he wants his players to have freedom. He wants them to have offensive freedom. He wants them to be able to try and make plays and make reads. He'd rather have them make a bad read than be afraid to make a read, which was the case previously with Dominic Ducharme, which is part of what stifled Cole Caulfield. He was so worried about where he should be instead of being able to just play the game. And Marty said it's hard to teach the concepts or the brands while teaching winning. And you think about it, and it makes sense. Like he wants them to play this open style, and he realizes it's probably going to result in what you said, Rick, some defensive breakdowns. But moving forward, he's going to have to find that balance, right? He's going to have to find that balance where they can play that sort of open brand of hockey he wants, but also be more responsible and have a better system in their defensive zone. So moving forward, that's going to be one of the really interesting things to see about this rebuild, is how he does that, because they definitely need to be better in their defensive zone. But right now, Marty just wants the young guys to play without fear, right? When Jordan Harris got called up at the end of last season, he said, you're going to make 3 or 4 mistakes every game. Don't worry about it. But once you get to a point where you're in 3 years into that building, you are going, then you have to be concerned when you make mistakes. Then you have to have the coach coming down on you when you make mistakes. So it's a balancing act for Marty as this rebuild goes forward, about letting the players play that freedom, that offensive style he wants. But at some point, he's going to have to reel back and teach the brand and the concept, along with teaching them how to shut things down and how to win games. So that's going to be a big coaching challenge for him moving forward.
Yeah, and one thing we do have to remember with this roster is, like, especially in the first half of the season, this is a worse roster than what the Canadiens had last year, right? There's no Tyler Toffoli, there's no Arturi Lehkonen. I guess you could say there's no Ben Sherratt, as much as I don't think he was a difference maker for the team, and he certainly hasn't been for any team he's been on since. But this is a team that has a lot of young players, and they're learning defense at the NHL level. And if the coach is teaching offense first, then it's tough. Now, they have improved their goals against and their goals for relative to last year, despite being a worse roster. So that's something to maybe hang your hat on if you're Marty St. Louis, but it hasn't been much of a change. I think if you're going to push this super open style, what I'd like to see, like, obviously you want to have them buckle down defensively a little bit when they get closer to being competitive and learn what it takes to actually defend, because we wouldn't be talking about San Montebo so much if they could defend. But I'd like to see the goals go up significantly, because they're, I think, 4 goals ahead of what they scored last season. That's not a lot. I know the injuries was a big part of that, but you got a lot of players continually underperforming and a lot of pressure on guys like Doc, Suzuki, Caulfield to get it done. And eventually they're going to have to find ways to squeeze more goals out of this lineup if they want to improve. And so it's at both ends, really. They've got to improve special teams. They've got to improve at even strength. There's a long track ahead of them in things that they have to improve to actually be competitive.
Yeah, I mean, Suzuki leads the team in scoring, but he's like somewhere around 80th in the NHL scoring race. So, yeah, they need more goals. And, I mean, the goals against, obviously, 5 rookie defensemen is going to factor into that. And also, all the injuries and up front, all the lines, the forward lines changing. You lose sort of a cohesiveness together when you've been playing with the same guys for a long time. You go back to the Danault, Tatar, Gallagher line, which were the best 5-on-5 lines in hockey. They were together for so long. They knew what in the offensive and defensive zone. They knew exactly what the other guys were going to do, which made it easier. So if next season they can stay more healthy and Marty St. Louis can have some more consistency with his lines, the 5 rookie defensemen having more experience, you would think they would be better defensively. And if Sam Montebo can play the way he did this season, that'll obviously help also.
Well, for me, the most disappointing part for the Habs season was that we were robbed of a full Mike Matheson season of hockey. I mean, for the sample size that we got from him this year, guys, he was must-see TV for me. Watch him, as Stu, you made the point in your articles before, his skating ability out there is second to none on this roster, and he was a marvel. And I thought what he brought to the team when he is healthy, he stabilized the back end, and he was just fun to watch on the ice, and he enjoyed himself and the concepts that Martin St. Louis wanted from his players this season.
It's disappointing also that they're not in the playoffs. Nobody expected them to be, but I was walking to the Bell Center before a recent game, and it was nice out. The weather is nice, spring's in the air, and Montreal needs playoff hockey. It really does. Like the city comes to life, right? It's sort of so as much as we didn't expect them to be, and next season I don't really expect them to be in the playoffs either. But Montreal needs playoff hockey. It's part of the city.
And the comment Ken Hughes makes about giving him a 3-year window gives him takes a little bit of pressure off in the event that they do make some strides next year to the point where they may need to get close to be postseason. But, they got a ways to go. And, like I've said before, my concern, I watch the guys, and maybe I'm old school defense, but when you got a lot of guys out of position in the defensive zone too often, it's just a matter of time, and it's tough to watch some nights, and hopefully they're going to identify that. And Martin St. Louis, can patch that up. And like I said before, it's a big part of the game. Offense is there. It's where the game's at, but you surely got to be able to defend. And you can talk about the rookies, you can talk about the defenseman inexperience. But when you got guys running all over the place, I have a concern with job description and responsibility, and not protecting those areas that should be protected. So work to do on that front, but maybe I'm too old school.
No, Rick, you're always new school for us, my friend. Let's put it that way. You're a new school cap for all of us out here. But Stu, you're absolutely right, though. When you think about it in the broader sense here for spring hockey, playoff hockey that is in the city of Montreal, we haven't had a proper viewing of this atmosphere in years, even during the Habs Cup run, when that was during the COVID-19 era, right? So this city is starving for that, and hopefully they'll get that maybe in a couple years from now in the Kent Hughes 3-year rebuild. We'll find out how this plays out for them. Don't forget to submit your questions and comments here on Hockey Inside Out. We look forward to conversing about that on a future episode. And for the YouTube page, check out Hockey Inside Out. And for the newsletter, head on by the MontrealGazette.com/newsletters to sign up for that. Full episodes and bonus content, head on by Hockey Inside Out. On behalf of Stu, Andrew, and Rick, we wish you a great week. We'll speak to you soon. Bye for now.